All right, welcome back to our Extra AI podcast series. And today I have an interesting topic. The name of the topic is going to be we are going to talk about reclaiming internet in the age of AI. I know it sounds little um, little different. Of course, in the age of internet, in the age of AI, a lot of things are happening. And so here I have Wouter Constant, an open protocol, censorship, resistance, and who controls the future of online communication. So these are some of the topics that I would like to go in today. And welcome on board, Wouter. Uh,
Thank you for having me.
so Wouter, a brief background about Wouter. Wouter is a contributor and supporter of Nostr, an open protocol that challenges on how today's internet is controlled by these centralized platforms. His Predominantly, his work focuses on open digital infrastructure, freedom of association, censorship resistance, and how we can build an internet where users, builders, and communities have a bit more control. So, without further ado, I would like to get started on this. Uh, Maybe let me get started with this question, Gotha. This is I know uh, we have different backgrounds on how we come into this uh, in this era of the age of AI. I would say, could you give a brief background about your personal story or a professional story about your work and how you involved becoming here with Nostr, or what is your background?
Um, I think a good way to enter this is that one of my main interests when I was already young was already tech stuff, but particularly distributed compute systems. So you can think about torrenting and all these types of things. Later you got Tor routing, um, mesh networks, radio stuff. These were always an interest of mine, and another interest of mine was also the economic side of things, and especially monetary things. So in the year of 2009, open protocol got introduced, a money protocol called Bitcoin,
Mhm.
and that caught my attention pretty early on because it intersected nicely into my interest. Um, but at first, right, this was one of the many protocols that came along, and the same goes for things like a Mastodon, so the AT Proto,
Mhm.
or later Matrix. Like there's a long list of protocols that some people are aware of. There is a longer list that people are not aware of because there, in all those years, a lot of protocols came out and they went nowhere. So I was always interested in these things. My I started to dedicate a lot of time into Bitcoin, trying to understand what is going on there. Um, uh, and that was a long process and a long journey that gave me a lot of the technical insight as well. Because from a formal side, I went to university studying history
Mhm.
and economic history with a focus on technological development and how technological development impacted our economic history. Um, and things as the rise of modernity and that type of stuff. So basically the last 350 years or so.
Mhm.
Um, so I approach these things from a broad context, you can say, but at the same time, I really want to know like the technical details, so how they work specifically. I'm not satisfied with having some vague understanding. So it's basically those two things, and that's ultimately also how I got into Nostr. It just so happens that the guy who invented Nostr, um, his name is Jeff. He's a pseudonymous developer. Nobody actually knows like particularly who he is, other than that he's from Brazil.
Mhm.
He, no, he says he's from Brazil, but his accent also gives it away. So not a lot of doubt there. Um, and it just so happens that both the interest of Bitcoin and another interest, which is a video game from 1998 called StarCraft Brood War. those aligned. So that's how I got into contact with him, and it just so happened that he created the protocol, which initially was just, as I already mentioned, one of these many protocols that get published online and go nowhere. It just so happened that a few years later, after he drafted it, it caught the attention of Jack Dorsey,
And
which is
when was
the
this? Which year?
so he published his description of the protocol in November 2020.
Oh,
And I
nice.
think it
Okay.
was either 2022 or 2023. I'm not quite sure. When it caught the attention of Jack Dorsey, the founder of Twitter,
Oh, okay.
which was he and Jack Dorsey already always was looking for a way to uh, um, get his website, his platform, Twitter, onto an open protocol because he saw a
Right.
lot of issues and problems going on there. Initially, he did that via organizing a working group called Blue Sky,
Hmm.
with the intended purposes of either finding or identifying a protocol, or if they cannot find it, create one itself. And that project Blue Sky, which was initially an internal Twitter thing, split off because Elon Musk took over Twitter
Right.
and went its own way. And Jack Dorsey pretty quickly got dissatisfied or disappointed with the direction that Blue Sky got into, and then not much later found out about this Nostr thing, and he got really excited. So he and that gave a lot of attention to the thing, and that basically was the catalyst that really got this Nostr project off the ground. And now we're here in 2026, and there are a lot of people building stuff, and things are looking pretty good, actually.
Beautiful. That's a great piece of background and the great personal and professional backstory before we get into this conversation. I would like to maybe for the for someone or some audience hearing this Nostr for the first time, in simple terms, if you would have to explain it without making it too technical, how could you put it across so that I know you gave a bit of a background, but if you could make it easier for audience to understand.
Yeah, no problem. So I'm running into a problem that the internet itself ran into in the 90s. So if
Mhm.
you go back and look at stuff that was like news reports or the stuff talking about the internet, you had these anchors that's like, what is this internet thing? A very interesting interaction was Bill Gates on the Late Show, where he got asked like, "What is this internet thing?" Because I heard that there was a baseball a broadcast of a baseball game on the on this internet thing. But what's the point? Because we already have radio. And then Bill Gates tried to explain that like, no, but you can listen to the radio whenever you can listen to the game whenever you want. And then the retort was, yeah, but I have tape recorders, so I can record the baseball game, so I can also listen whenever I want. So it's always difficult to explain something when it's new because the audience doesn't have the words, the concepts, or any intuition at all as to what I'm going to address. So the easiest way for me is to do it in contrast of what people already know. So Nostr is a new way to organize ourselves on the internet. And we already have an internet. We already are organized on the internet. We've done a great job at that in the last 20 years or so, let's say. But the way that we organized ourselves was via what we call platforms. So, and we are all very aware of these platforms. For videos, we use YouTube. For audio or podcasts or music, we use Spotify, and et cetera, et cetera, right? So, and this is the way for taxis, we use Uber. So these are all what we call platforms. And what these platforms do is they facilitate three things in general. They facilitate an identity, which is the account that you create at these platforms. They associated with that, they also facilitate the network, the social network that you have. So this is what we call a social graph. So these are the people that you follow, or people that follow you, or your friends, or whatever it is that you the type of platform that you're on. The second thing that they facilitate is more practical, what we call hosting, right? You're posting things, whether it's like a tweet or a video or a podcast, that data has to be stored somewhere and has to be made available to other people. So these are the giant server farms that people may be aware of. This is the same thing that we have cloud computing, but this notion of the cloud doesn't exist, it's just somebody else's computer. This is exactly this, right? The content itself has to be stored somewhere on a drive and made available to other people to look at it. And then the third thing is what you could call indexing. So these are your algorithms or your search functions. So to ensure that you can find things on these platforms or things get suggested to you. So things you're not already, you're able to get into touch with things that you're not already aware of. And it's these platforms provide these three things, right? And they're
Mm-hmm.
all within this platform, but they're siloed. So your YouTube account is not a Spotify account, is not your LinkedIn, etc. These are all separate things, and they all exist in their own separate silos. So this is the lay of the land as to how we're organized right now. We're organized using these platforms. The point with Nostr is that we're organizing differently. What you're able to do is you're able to generate your own identity. So it's not no longer an account somewhere. It's just something that you're able to generate yourself right where you are. And subsequently, as a consequence, these things are guarded by cryptography, but we might get into it later. But as a consequence, that means that because I'm able to generate my own identity and as such and also therefore create my own address book basically as to the contacts that I have or my own social graph, these things are now in control of myself. They're no longer at some particular platform anymore. And then the question of hosting comes around because still this data needs to be made available. But these things are no longer tied to a particular place, right? Those YouTube videos are on youtube.com specifically. And within Nostr, it doesn't necessarily matter anymore where things are hosted as long as my audience is able to figure out where they are hosted because they are able to identify that it came from me themselves. They're no longer, so we no longer rely on a third party for me to create a publication and for the audience to interpret that publication. So the only thing that third party has to do is to make sure that it's stored somewhere and made available. So it's only, and therefore we call it relays. The only purpose that these servers now have is to relay the information, as opposed to performing these three functions altogether that I described initially. And then lastly, in terms of this indexing, which are your algorithms or your search functions, these just become services that others can provide or you can provide yourself. So if you have a very powerful computer, you can let it run all day and you can index the entire internet if you want, right? And you can be totally independent. Or you can just use some service provided by somebody else. So it's not that right now TikTok dictates what the algorithm is, right? It's a black box. Nobody can look into it. The same goes for YouTube, etc. And here it basically opens up a marketplace of indexing or algorithms or suggestions. So what we've done is that we've taken away control of our identity and brought it to ourselves. As a consequence, we are able to shop. We're flexible as to who is hosting our data. And maybe somebody's hosting my data today and I can switch to some other party tomorrow. And this is where this notion of censorship resistance comes from. And lastly, I'm also able to then apply whatever perspective or algorithm on this web of publications that I see fit or that I personally like, and I can change those perspectives whenever I want. So we're not. So this is a different way of organizing ourselves. That's
Mm-hmm.
basically what I want to get across. We're no longer reliant on these platforms. We can still use platforms in some sense whenever they're useful. But right now we're stuck at those platforms, also due to this notion of network effect that we're probably going to get into later. But to get it across, what is Nostr? Nostr is a new architecture, a new way of organizing ourselves. Just as radio and newspapers and television was a different way of organizing ourselves as opposed to the internet, the way we started to organize ourselves on the internet was via these platforms, and now Nostr is like a step beyond there, where we're now doing it in a new way.
Beautiful, beautiful. I like the way you have explained from the previous generation about how the information organization is happening and how it can be shared and distributed and leveraged. And now we are moving from I know we did not even talk about, we are not even talking about the concepts of centralized information versus decentralized, but we are getting there. So here whether it is platforms like X or Instagram or TikTok and LinkedIn and so on and so forth, they predominantly dominate how people publish or discover information or even consume the content. So, and I agree to some extent that where you're saying is that inherently there is some things that are broken in this model because it is always controlled by these centralized corporations, and then you do not have control of this information where it is coming in from or where it is being consumed. And so here you describe Nostr as giving the people, but not the corporations, the power to share information or connect and publish stuff online. So if I take this further, what does this mean? What does this shift really mean for the creators or users or communities? Because this is where how the creators or the users or communities get built and how they interact. Maybe if you could provide some thoughts around that.
Yeah, so probably a good way to approach this is to point out where um, the current way of organizing is breaking. So originally on the internet, like what we call Web 1.0, is that people created a website. And people
Mhm.
had their own websites, and then um, apparently that was too complicated for everybody to create their own websites, so we all went to one particular website. Initially, this was like MySpace, where you create a page, and then later it became Facebook, because we're not creating our own websites. And it was hard to scale from a technical sense, whereas these platforms were able to get a lot of investment and scale in a certain way to facilitate more and more people, all the way to the point that Facebook basically facilitates a lot of these functions for like the 8 billion population or whomever it is on the earth,
Right.
right? They have billions of users. We only have 8 billion people on this planet. So in all practical sense, they already cover everyone. So in that sense, it's scaled very well. The problem is that there are more dimensions to this scaling, and it's breaking down. In one of the best ways to illustrate that is like from a political perspective. Because Facebook is facilitating everybody in the world, they have to coordinate the various interests of all of those, let's say, billions of people in the world. And it's not just those billions individual users that have very varying interests. It's also the advertisers which are their actual customers, that have varying interests and perspectives on how things ought to be. And then now we're already in a situation where it actually becomes geopolitical because we more and more governments themselves start to start to have like an opinion as to what the policy ought to be of this platform. So we have one platform, therefore we have one policy or one institution that designs these policies, that is getting pulled on. It's like a five-way tug of war as to what those policies actually ought to be. And this is an unsolvable problem. So basically, we painted ourselves as a population in the way that we organized ourselves into a corner where we are asking or demanding or pleading one institution, basically this corporation, to design policies that are then subsequently affect everybody, and therefore nobody's actually satisfied. Um, and the same thing goes for moderation. Now they are responsible for dealing as to what is AI generated content or what isn't AI generated, what are bot farms, what isn't bot farms, what is spam, what isn't spam. The amount of responsibility that we've heaped up onto these platforms means that that's the thing that doesn't scale. So it scales from a technical sense. It doesn't scale from a responsibility sense. These platforms have too much responsibility. So that means that just from a practical sense, right? It's not like from an ideological sense. Just from a practical sense, they have too much responsibility that you cannot reasonably expect them to bear that responsibility. So that means that you, as either a content consumer or a content producer, are always a passive victim of whatever policy decisions that happens to be made right at that moment as a result of some geopolitical climate or the whims of the CEO right at that moment. And I guess that's the biggest thing. It's also not just from a intentional policy perspective. It's also from a practical sense that if for some reason, right, some rat chews a cable and the system goes down for an hour, now everybody is without their service. So it's not just whether they intend to block you, just things can go wrong or moderation mistakes can be made. And now you are a victim of this. So everybody, especially content creators, are getting more and more conscious of their dependency of these platforms and the precarious position that they're actually in because their business is digital in nature. So the moment something goes wrong, their business is shut down, and that directly impacts their livelihood. So it's not just even a political dimension here. It's like an economic dimension. There are all
Right.
these dimensions. Things just don't actually work. So what Nostr then subsequently provide in this new way of organizing is because I have a more direct relationship with, let's say I'm a content producer, I have a more direct relationship with my audience, and this technical infrastructure is just facilitation that I'm flexible in is what is using. I can use different providers at the same time. So if one goes down, the other one is still up. If one starts to ban me, I can always migrate to somebody else. And my audience is always able to find me and interact with me. And the same goes then for from an audience perspective is that I don't have to right now if a content creator is banned, I have to actively go and look like, okay, where now on the internet does he exist, right? And then he probably exists on some marginal platform that nobody goes to. So if I want to follow that content creator now, I now have to create another account in a platform that I normally don't go to. I don't really use that app, but I have to specifically use that app to just consume the content from the content creator. So that it starts to introduce a lot of friction. So it's basically these silos that we've created in these platforms. They start to introduce friction the moment you're now forced to move outside of these silos. So it's all nice and good when you're inside the silo, but
Mm-hmm.
the silo itself is like breaking at the seams, right? It's not it doesn't scale anymore for all the reasons that I explained. So now because we're forced to also move outside of these silos, the way that we've organized starts to introduce more friction. And Nostr is basically the way, it's just a better way of organizing where all this type of friction starts to dissolve.
Beautiful. So I get what you're saying. So here the thing is that there are different ways of how the content is being moderated or controlled or uh, maybe organized by different it can be for political reasons, it can be for economic reasons, or it can be for whatever things that are happening because these are controlled by these big platforms. And maybe depending on the geography or the region that you are in, there might be an additional layer of controls that happen. And like you mentioned, like for suppose I'm following a particular content creator or a particular personality, a person, and following their tweets or following their articles, and now for whatever reason they get banned, I think I cannot follow them. So rather than depending on the platform, now you can you with a platform or with a service like Nostr, you say that you can now continue with this particular person or a personality or a identification that you have, the you can follow them. So but here now my question is, let me take this question a little further. The relationship between these users and algorithms, how does Nostr handle this relationship between the users and the algorithms? Because again, the same kind of thing would arise, right? Like now we are living in a world of fast changes with AI driven feeds coming in. So again, it will get to a stage where what people see, what people believe, and how they engage with. How does Nostr change this particular relationship between the users and the algorithms? Would
Yeah,
it
so
not
it's
be
a
again another platform, or how do you put that?
No, let's start out with why we're using algorithms in the first place is because there's more content produced per second than basically anyone can consume in a lifetime, right? There are more hours of YouTube, like I'm so many hours of video posted on YouTube every second. You cannot consume in a lifetime. So you have a way you need a way to filter or to have some notes like depending on what it is that you're looking for, figure out what is relevant to you. So we need algorithms from
Mhm,
that
mhm,
perspective. But that also means that these algorithms are just ultimately they're just perspectives. They're if we imagine all the contents like a cloud of just the content being there and you now need a particular lens or perspective as to pick out those things that you actually want to see so you're able to consume them, right? Because you cannot consume a million videos at the same time. So what because these platforms are in charge and responsible for facilitating this service for you in filtering these things, there are a lot of incentives as to again, like this is this tug of war thing, right? There is the incentive of the platform for you to retain attention. And there are multiple dimensions here, whereas to in some sense that's a neutral thing. Like they don't particularly care why you have attention for a particular thing as long as you have attention. So
mhm,
in a way, they want to optimize the algorithms to function well. Um, there are some malicious, let's say, or negative elements there. Is that it's probably easier to maintain your intention if you're outraged, right? So there are things there. There is also then the commercial perspective, which is an incentive as to, okay, if I as a platform have to make the decision as to between A or B, and B just pays me more, I'm going to choose B, right? And then there is the political angle. It's like, okay, well, if I have to make the decision between offering you A or B, and the government's gonna fine me if I offer you A, I'm just not gonna offer you A, so I'm just gonna only offer you B. Um, the difference here is if you open it up to let's as I try to explain this marketplace, if it's just a service that where you're asking, it's like, okay, I want this particular perspective, and I'm now going to leverage this perspective, and at the same time, I'm also able to leverage another perspective as I want to, right, in another tab. If I just want to see everything from my followers, I get everything from my followers. If I want to see everything from my expanded network, so that would be followers of followers, I see that. If I want to see something from a perspective where some very sophisticated algorithm is running in the background, I'm able
mhm,
to do that. And maybe if I a cheaper algorithm for me is to use or a free one, that's probably going to have like a lot of commercial interest in the background because there are advertisers paying for stuff. And maybe if I pay money, I don't get that type of influence. That's the case already right now. You have Google, which is free, or you have Kagi, which is also a search engine where you pay for, and you don't get these advertised results at the top, right? So it's just this because because we're not reliant on a particular party designing these algorithms for us, and we open it up to a marketplace, we are able to better align incentives between what the market offers and what I as a user actually want. Because if there's a disalignment between my interest as to what I want to see and what is offered to me via an algorithm, I'm just able to go to another algorithm, and I'm not suffered with the consequence of leaving a platform. And again, this ties to this notion of network effect that well, I'll get into the notion of network
mm,
effect in a bit if you allow me. But just to round up basically the answer right here is that because we're opening it up as to an open market where people can pick and choose whatever perspective they want on the web. Um, it it's easier to align incentives than it is currently because you have zero say as to what the algorithm is. as well from a user, as well from a consumer perspective, as well as from a content creator perspective, because these content creators are just endlessly chasing a black box, right? They're acting from the
Hmm.
outside, they're looking in. It's like, okay, what works, what doesn't work, and they're continuously chasing this algorithm. Whereas the moment it just breaks up, there is no global perspective anymore. There is no one algorithm to game anymore.
Hmm.
Um, so it's pointless, right? I don't know what the billions. If we assume like a Nostr world, I don't even know what all these peoples, all these users, what type of perspectives they decided to use. The only
Hmm.
thing I'm able to do is create quality content in order to engage my audience because I
Hmm.
cannot rely on gaming a particular algorithm anymore because I don't know maybe I don't know what algorithm my users are actually using or what vector it is that they came to my content.
Hmm. So yeah, so if I get it right, it's mainly about like I can, as a user, depending on the perspectives and depending on the algorithms and depending on what I want to follow or what I need to do, I can follow that. And I do not get to be controlled by a perspective that I do not like. And these are, and there is no particular platform that is controlling these algorithms. So in that way, a user can pick and choose their perspective, and depending on that perspective, you can continue following that perspective, and you can go there. So this is where you are removing Nostr is removing that central control, uh, but if Nostr is removing this central control, what prevents it from becoming lawless or spam filled or unsafe? Because there are these questions might arise, right? Okay, now I'm removing this central layer of content control, but now there might be other things about there might be unsafe content or spam filled. I get what you're saying because you're saying that okay, now this is my user perspective. They want to just keep going there. So how can you prevent that it becomes a little lawless or spam filled or unsafe?
So it's important to understand is that when we're um, this is a result of this notion of censorship resistance, right? So
Mhm.
the instinct of a lot of people directly goes to this notion is like, okay, if it's hard to resist censorship, that allows bad people to do bad things, right? Because we cannot stop them anymore. And I would like to flip the perspective in saying, no, actually, Nostr is pro censorship. And what it facilitates is freedom of association. Because what the reason that a consequence of the fact that let's say Twitter or Facebook is now facilitating billions of people on the planet, they have like this um, overarching, vague moral responsibility of taking the interest into account of all these billions of users. Whereas in this Nostr perspective, where users are have this notion of censorship resistance, they're not particularly reliant on anyone. That also means that the people that are facilitating things are able to apply whatever policy it is that they want, right? If I run a server and I, for some stupid reason, hate people that are wearing white caps with a red hat logo on it,
Mhm.
and I ban those people, that's absolutely fine. I'm completely because you are not bothered by the fact that I have that policy.
Right.
So in that sense, because you are providing censorship resistance in the foundation of the system, that subsequently allows everybody to censor to their heart's content, whatever the reason it is. So so therefore, this notion of like, okay, well, we might get abuse material posted
Mhm.
online. Well, it's not actually in whose interest is it to host abuse material? It's not in a lot of people's interest to actually host this material. So they're probably just going to ban it, right?
Mhm.
They're going to remove it from their own servers. A lot of users don't have any interest in watching abuse material. So it's probably going to be filtered away. Even if it does exist, it's going to be filtered away in the perspectives that they're and the algorithms that they're using. So we're able to apply these moderation policies, let's say, on on all these various levels underneath, because we're no longer relying on one entity, right, this corporation, to provide all those things for us. This is the point that I made earlier.
Mhm.
It's too much responsibility for these platforms to cover all these things. So rather than having them be responsible to cover everything, we're able to just distribute this responsibility and make it put it more locally where it is, where the rubber actually hits the road, and people are free to go at that however they like. So they're free to impose whatever policy, however stupid or childish it is. It doesn't matter,
Right.
because ultimately, as a user, I can always just go to a place that does accommodate me. So I want your audience to flip this notion as to censorship resistance actually means freedom of association.
Right.
So if I want to watch you and you want to say stuff and I want to listen to you, who is a third person to get in the way, right? That first person should not be forced to facilitate our interaction at all, right? So that's the situation that we're in now right now. Facebook has to partner. It's like, okay, are we going to facilitate this? Are we not going to facilitate this? No, right? If we'll just find whatever home that it is, or whatever route or whatever method it is that we're interacting with each other, and we're all happy because we're free to associate with each other. And whoever is dislikes whatever it is that they're doing, they have nothing to do with us at all, and they're not forced to have anything to do with us at all.
Right, right. I like the way you have addressed this issue on about how when the content becomes spam filled or when the content becomes unsafe, it's not about that, but how these things can get downgraded by the users itself rather than somebody controlling it. Of course, this is where the question itself comes about, is moderation still needed when no single company owns the network? So this is where the question goes, right? I think you may not even need the aspect of moderation of the content. Is
Well,
that is
so moderation can happen on whatever layer it is. So we're still using these we're still using servers, right? Because content
Mhm,
still has to be stored somewhere and made available somewhere. So
mhm,
that is done by a server. We call it a relay. They're in control as to what it is that they're actually relaying. And then subsequently, I use a particular app, and that app can still filter things. So there are multiple layers as to where moderation can take place, and everybody is free to apply whatever moderation that it is that they want, because we're not in each other's way anymore. It's only because we're only in each other's way because we're all forced into this one platform, right? Into this one silo, that we now start to be in each other's way, and we're bumping into each other, and we have different perspectives as to what should be allowed or what shouldn't be allowed. And by breaking this stuff open, we're able to everybody is able to impose whatever moderation it is that they see fit. That's the basically the fundamental point that I tried to make. The problem is
sure,
not
sure.
moderation. Moderation is you always want to filter, just as an algorithm is a method to filter, moderation is a method to filter. If I want to have a conversation where there's no cursing for some reason, I should be able to have a conversation where all the cursing is now filtered out or removed. And if I want to have a conversation and I don't care if people curse, I should also be able to have that conversation. And those two perspectives are not in each other's way anymore.
Right, right. I like the way you've put that across. So now in this world of, let me take a bit of let me navigate this a bit more. Now we got in this world of AI and AI slop, there is so much of content being generated. There's so much of material being generated. We may soon see a lot of these AI agents publishing or curating content or recommendations and interacting with this content. How can or open protocols like Nostr become this important infrastructure for this AI native digital experiences? What are your thoughts in this aspect? Because now that the content is multiplying so much and we have so much of AI slop, how do you envision that open protocols like Nostr can help navigate this? problem?
Yes. So this is where it gets interesting because um, this is a it's especially platforms that are going to have a hard time dealing with this because they have to at the gate, right, at the entrance, have to filter things out or have to make a decision as to who is allowed in or who's not allowed in.
Right.
Is this AI generated slop? Is this spam, etc. Whereas with this open protocol, we have no control over this at all. It's I am able to generate an identity at will, right? And I'm able to generate as many identities as I want. The same thing goes for the computer. The computer, the AI, the agent is also able to generate an identity at will. And from a protocol perspective, there's no way to differentiate between these things. So our starting point from a Nostr or an open protocol perspective is different because we're forced to deal with this in a different way because we already embraced it, right? We already embraced the ability for agents to be active on the network. And so there's no friction there. Like these protocols, they're to try to, in some way or another, try to impose friction, right? You have to click a CAPTCHA, you have to prove that you're not a robot, etc. This is not the case. This is not the case with Nostr. What with Nostr, it's just different, right? It starts with me and my perspective. Okay, I want to follow you, right? If I want to make sure that I'm only following humans, I need to ensure that, okay, how am I going to do that? I'm having a conversation with you now. Okay, the AI technology has increased a lot, so maybe you are completely fake, right? Maybe I'm talking to a computer, but generally, I trust the fact that you are real. And if I wanted to be sure, I would actually try to meet you in meet space and I can just shake your hand. And that
Hmm.
way I'm actually know that you're real. So I'm able to have to establish that connection to you on that basis. And we're able to actually, as humans, able to scale these social networks just by shaking hands. So there's this notion that you're six handshakes away from everyone in the world. So establishing a network where this notion of like, I don't want robots, I only want humans, that's just focusing on this six handshake problem, right? I shake a lot of people's hands in my life. So okay, that's layer one. And
Hmm.
then I only need to extend trust a little bit to already cover a whole bunch of people on this planet, right? Three handshakes away. And I'm reasonably sure that now I'm only interacting with a perspective that I'm only dealing with humans. So this is how we solve and this is what we call web of trust, and this is how we solve this perspective is like how do I differentiate between humans and computers is basically shaking hands, right? It's the real world where the computer cannot leveraging where the computer just simply cannot go to. Unless they start to get like Android bodies or whatever. We'll cover that problem later, I guess. So then at the same time, um, an AI or an agent it doesn't necessarily generate spam, right? It can be it can be very functional. It can perform a function, it can add value, and I actually want to follow the AI. And
Hmm.
I'm free to do that as well, right? So I'm because from a protocol perspective, there's no difference between what a human is or what an AI is or an agent is. It's just a cryptographic key pair, a cryptographic identity. And how I engage with that is something that comes from me and my perspective and how I engage with the network instead of me relying again on some central place, a central board, a corporation that has to make these decisions for the billions to figure out ways to actually figure out what works and how do we get around it and what is practical. And maybe what's practical now is not practical in a week, but we've figured it out in a new method in a week or a new method in a year, etc. And it's just an evolving thing that ultimately is a better way. It's more like the how the body, how the immune system of the body functions, whereas which is like a dynamic. It's more dynamic between the outside world and what happens between my body. Whereas these platforms are more like Bubble Boy, right? We'll just wrap you inside of plastic and will protect you against the environment. And whenever there's a tear in the plastic, now you get sick.
Right.
Whereas in this Nostr ecosystem is like, okay, we continuously exposed to all these pathogens, and maybe we get a cold, but we'll get better from the cold, and now we have a enhanced immune system. So it's a different way of approaching this thing. It's like we've opened up the doors,
Hmm.
and that allows us to also get the good, right? We're able to get the good of the AI as well as, okay, this bad also comes in, but we have methods and means. We're not powerless to generate like an immune system to deal with the bad things. At the same time, also leveraging the good things that come along.
Right, right. I think I like the aspect of how here in the world of Nostr, in the world of decentralized systems here, you are always driven by the users' needs and the users' perspectives, and that is how you build your ecosystem or your perspectives, your learning, your algorithm, and other things. So in that way, like you said, in some scenarios it can be that, hey, I also want to follow some of these AI agents, what they are doing, what they are generating. And again, it's under my purview or what I am trying to achieve, and based out of that I build these things. I know we are getting onto the top of the hour, but I want to, before I get into this critical question that I ask about my guests about the extra AI question, I have one other question about the aspect about how do you differentiate yourself, maybe in the context of like I know when you compare with Blue Sky or Activity Pub or Mastodon, other uh, or other decentralized projects, what is that key architectural or philosophical difference from Nostr's standpoint?
The cryptography central and in the hands of the users. So it all starts with what we call public-private key cryptography. It's this notion that you generate a secret number at random, and this secret number is something you have to keep close. And then by the magic of cryptography, you're able to create a derivative number, and that number you give out to the public, and you're able to via cryptographic functions prove that you are the person in control over the secret behind the public number. And this is something um, uh, because we're dealing with these large strings of numbers and these secrets, and if something goes wrong, ultimately there's nobody that can help you, right? These other protocols did not dare to actually go there
Hmm.
and put this responsibility in the hands of the user. So they started out the design or architecture of the system by encapsulating this phenomena where basically your identity exists, and then they started off from there because they said like, well, we cannot expect our users to be responsible. So Nostr made the exact same decision that Bitcoin made. In Bitcoin, it's the exact same thing. It's you generate. It's also funny enough. It's the exact same cryptography that is used in Bitcoin. It's like a Bitcoin address and a Nostr identity are indistinguishable from each other from that
Hmm.
perspective. But the main key difference between all these protocols is that Nostr dared to say it's like, okay, we have reasons to put the cryptography in the hands of the users because it actually allows for a fundamental different architecture and a different paradigm where we are able to organize in a fundamentally different way. And let's just go ahead and try this. And whatever problems that come along with carrying this responsibility is something that we'll figure out towards the future. But um, uh, for so far, in the past 17 years, it hasn't necessarily been a showstopper for Bitcoin. I'm like you can say is like a lot of people don't actually hold their own Bitcoin because they are at exchanges, etc. But I think fundamentally it's just a thing where it's a generational shift. Like the moment kids grow up with this notion of generating a key pair and holding a secret and having an intuition around how to deal with these things, that's a uh, um, I don't think that basically solves a lot of the problems. And then we have systems around it, right? We have tools, we have hardware wallets like hardware things, we have cryptographic tools, we have all these means that we can build around it in order to make carrying this responsibility of holding your own identity more bearable. But that's the central point, is that Nostr made the bold move to allow you to be responsible over your own digital identity and start it from there.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think I like this way of explaining, and this is where I think Nostr will differentiate with the other decentralized platforms, because you're making sure that the end user, the user who is using, is more responsible about what he or she is doing it and how they are maintaining that.
You
Yeah,
can
I
always
think
shift back, right? You
yeah.
can always
Hmm.
it's better to start there and saying, okay,
Hmm.
you as a user are responsible. You can always shift back. You can always hand over the that responsibility to somebody else, right? There's going to be a trade-off because now you're
Hmm.
not now you're at the behest, right, of that other person, and you have to trust that other person. But that's fine. But that's also always a decision that you can make. If it so happens that in your situation or whatever, you're not able to carry that responsibility or you want to hand over that responsibility, you can always put that responsibility in the custody of another person. But from an architectural perspective, it starts to open up all these other things that simply are more difficult or don't allow you to do things
Hmm.
in these other architectures like Blue Sky or ActivityPub or
Right,
etc.
right, right. Got it. So I think in the architecturally, I think it's still possible. Oh, yeah, okay. So let me get into this important question. I keep terming this as the extra AI question, the $1 million or the $1 billion question. I know this world where AI systems are increasingly, they are controlling the discovery, recommendations, trust, and digital identity, and a lot of other things. What the technology builders care. I know we talked about some of these things already. Uh, about Nostr now, what makes it meaningfully different from the centralized platforms and the decentralized alternatives out there? So I know if explain that to some extent. Is there anything else that you would like to add on to that?
Yes, I do. For everybody involved with AI or developing things with AI or agents or structures, Nostr is permissionless and your AI agent can just do all the things. You don't have APIs, you don't need permission from another system or some system administrator that allows you to do things or not. You can I can go, I can give my agent, say to my agent, generate a Nostr identity. We didn't go into like the broad things like because of social media, but Nostr is not just social media. It's a new way to organize on the internet, and there are a lot of things that we're doing on the internet. We also have like a protocol for Git, so you don't use GitHub. But we're able to leverage Git servers in a decentralized way. So now I don't need to create a GitHub account for my agent. My agent just can generate a Nostr identity. It can set up a Git repository. It can interact with other Git repositories out there. There is no permission needed or required to do all these things. That also means that and because it's just cryptographic numbers and computers love cryptographic numbers, right?
Right,
It's difficult
right,
for us humans, but it's perfect for the agent. The agent has no problem at all. So your agent is absolutely free to roam this open network and leverage all the powers that it is. And there are a lot of guys that are within the Nostr ecosystem developing all these systems and AI or agent orchestration, etc. All these things. Within the Nostr context. And we're just able to move so much faster than all the other systems because the other systems, they are, again, platforms with closed off walls. They're silos. You need an API key, et cetera, et cetera. They're just introducing frictions. You're not dependent on the decisions that they make. And here, you're not. you're absolutely free, and if somebody developed something, you can just leverage it, or you can build your own stuff. And the so it again, because we're open, we don't discriminate between human and machine. The only thing that
Mhm.
we look at is like what is a key pair. Your experience building inside of the Nostr ecosystem with agents is so much better than it's going to be within these platforms. Maybe they are a little bit more developed because there are like millions and millions and millions thrown at these companies right now, but as what the ultimate potential is, you're far better off. So I would encourage a lot of these people that work with AI agents to have a look at Nostr, see what the options and the possibilities are, see what's already developed. I mean, just ask your agent, right, to figure
Mhm.
this out. Your agent knows, right? And ask your agent if it likes Nostr, and it will explain you exactly why it's in love with Nostr because it's permissionless and just go ahead and do whatever it wants.
Beautiful, beautiful. I think I like the differentiator aspect here and how you have put it across. It's great chatting with you and great. Thanks for sharing your perspective on Nostr, the decentralized protocol, the open publishing, and the future of internet. I really liked. I really liked our conversation. I learned a lot. So, as we close, what are those two or three key takeaways that you would like the audience to remember? And for listeners who want to explore Nostr, where should they start with? Two questions, I think. Two or three key takeaways, and then if listeners want to explore more, where can they go?
Yes. So I think I want the audience to take away that Nostr is not necessarily complicated or difficult. What you're going to experience for the most part is the fact that it is new, right? So the same way that people were able to write a letter, and there are a lot of difficult steps into writing a letter and folding it into an envelope and getting the right amount of post-it stamps. And if you think about it, it's not it's a non-trivial process, but everybody in the world basically was able to do it because it was normal to them. And then the same thing goes for then subsequently going on the internet was normal for them. It's the same thing with Nostr. The friction, a lot of the friction that you're going to experience is just the fact that it's new. It's not the fact that it's particularly difficult or complicated. So, and it will open things up, and it's ultimately just a better system, right? I'm not here just. It's not just the fact that these platforms or whatever are bad. It's also I'm also advocating here for a system. It's just better. Um, so that's one of the things that I want to have the audience keep in mind with the added thing where okay we're practically speaking we're only 3 years in, right, of building this
Mhm.
stuff. So there are a lot of well-developed clients and apps out there. They're pretty smooth and well polished. A lot of the other stuff is a little bit buggy. So we're only 3 years in, and a lot of this stuff is done on spare time that people go into it. So it's still early days. As to where they go, because it's an open platform, nobody owns it. There is no organization, there's no corporation. There are a lot of different apps out there. I'm just going to send you to nostr.org. It's there. It's not an official website. It's just a website. It has information there, and if you're motivated enough, you'll figure it out. Right? That's basically the only thing that I'm going to give away. Is that's a nice starting point, and if you're motivated enough, you'll able to figure it out because many other people have been able to figure it out before you.
Beautiful. I love the conversation, Wouter. Thanks for your time.
Thanks you for having me.
Thank you for tuning in to this season 19 finale episode of XTrawAI. Today we explored the future of the internet with Wouter Constant, including Nostr, open protocols, censorship resistance, and why decentralized communication matters in the age of AI. Big thank you to Wouter for sharing his insights, and thank you to our listeners for joining us. Please follow XTrawAI, share the episode, and stay tuned as we kick off season 20 next week with more exciting conversations at the intersection of AI, technology, business, and society. This is Raghu Banda, and until next time, let's keep extracting the raw AI conversations. Stay curious, keep exploring, and happy predicting the future with XTrawAI.